UConn takes out DePaul in ho-hum fashion in Chicago, but there are keys for the rest of the season as we head towards the tournament. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all of your support. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. And to show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. If you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this for the first time, hit that subscribe button, click it. If you're following on Apple or Spotify or you're not, would love to have you follow there for the audio versions because you never know when, YouTube shut down for a day because of whatever. It's just always good to have a backup. So follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts. Some of you may just be all audio and not want to see this beautiful face all the time. So totally get that. Let's jump into it. For the 31st time in the Big East regular season, UConn asserted its dominance against using a balanced offensive attack and relentless defense to cruise past DePaul. 84-58 on Wednesday night. Kaitlyn, Chen, and Azzi Fudd each poured in 17 points to lead the number 6 Huskies 20-2, 11-0 overall in the Big East, who secured their 10th consecutive victory with a commanding second half performance, really commanding second and third quarter. So it's kind of like in between there, second and third, the middle parts of the game where they dominated. Despite an off night from leading scorer Paige Bueckers, who was held to just 8 points, UConn's depth proved too much for the Blue Demons. Freshman Sarah Strong continued her steady rise, contributing 11 points and 8 rebounds. A little bit of an off night for Sarah, if you can call it that, while the Huskies defense stifled DePaul's offense after an early push. It was a record-setting crowd in Wintrust Arena, 8,305, to watch DePaul as they hung tough in the first half, briefly cutting the deficit to 3, but UConn responded with a 17-4 surge before halftime, and then putting the game out of reach with a 10-0 and 18-2 runs in the third quarter. Jory Allen and Taylor Johnson-Matthews each scored 19 for DePaul, but the Blue Demons simply couldn't match the Huskies' depth, size, and efficiency, especially from beyond the arc, where UConn shot a scorching 54.5% from 3. This is something that Bella and I talked about in the show prior to the game, probably came out about 5 o'clock. If you watch that, we were wrong about them covering the spread. I think it was 33, but we were right about the fact that UConn's shooting was going to be the difference here because DePaul is not a great shooting team. It was their 26th straight win over DePaul. The Huskies now turn their attention to Sunday's matchup against Butler as they continue to fine-tune their play for the stretch run of the season. And 2 key players could significantly impact the team's rotation down the stretch. They are freshman forward center Jana El-Elfi and the veteran wing Aubrey Griffin. While UConn has leaned heavily on its core stars, getting meaningful contributions from its bench will be crucial, both from El-Elfi and Griffin, and they've shown signs of being valuable assets as the season progresses. Jana, we know, promising 6'5" from Egypt, arrived at UConn with a lot of publicity. And I wouldn't even call it hype. There was legitimately, a lot of promise for her to come in and be the starting center for this UConn team. But adapting to the speed, physicality of the college game, and also coming back from an Achilles injury has been, she's been a work in progress. But she has been a lot better lately from a defensive perspective and also from a rebounding perspective. So despite all that, she's really become the go-to and really has carved out a role, really kind of showing that defensive versatility, showing her ability to rebound, improving offensive instincts and confidence. Her first career three-pointer against DePaul was a glimpse of the kind of stretch big potential she possesses. If she can start doing that, she could be a big X factor in matchups where UConn needs more size and interior presence, but also to draw the bigs of opposing teams away from the lane to allow Paige more room to operate, to allow Sarah more room to operate. It's all a cause and effect thing. On the other side, Griffin's return from injury adds a different dimension to UConn's rotation. She's a freak athlete, an explosive first step, and a strong defensive motor. Aubrey has the ability to guard multiple positions. I think 1 through 4 I would give her. Maybe not 5, depending on how big the person is. She has elite she has making her an incredible presence when you're playing against teams with elite perimeter players. Throwing her 6'2" body out there against a 5'10" guard. I mean, would have loved her against Hannah Hidalgo. I'm dead serious. That would have been an incredible matchup. She can create those type of mismatches where she uses that size to kind of make this person, whoever it is. I'm sorry, guys. I haven't been yawning a lot lately, but had a rough night last night with sleep. And that's going into this morning. So apologies there. And also, it might have been the fact that I was watching double games and did a late night live reaction show for the men. But that's life, right? If Jana continues to gain confidence and Griffin regains full strength, UConn's depth will become even more formidable. And with the postseason looming, Gino's ability to trust his bench in key moments could be a deciding factor between a strong tournament run and another season of coming up short. So I really think those two in particular, we talked about Aubrey's instant impact of just having her presence back. But I think with Jana, she's really kind of been this person that's been okay with coming off the bench. Then Gino would start to kind of start her in the second half when Ice was ineffective. And now Ice is kind of relegated to less minutes, even though she played, decent last night. You have this kind of 6'5" now forward center that you feel comfortable with. And all we're looking for is that one other person to add to that front court / wing outside of Sarah. Sarah's her own anomaly. She, like I said, for me, Sarah's the best player in the country. So, yeah, I think Jana, again, is going to be a huge X factor as well as Aubrey. So when we return, we're going to talk about the SEC games that are coming up. And while that Tennessee game may be more challenging than you guys might think, we're going to talk about that coming up after the break.
Attending an NFL playoff game has got to be an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Time Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been any easier. I found a super deal that gave me an incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the guaranteed Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. You have on-ticket delivery, lowest price guarantee. You even had event cancellation and job loss protection. Absolute no-brainer. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms may apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, back on Locked On UConn. Hopefully you guys are using Game Time to secure all of your tickets, not just NFL playoff tickets, because the Super Bowl is here. And I don't know how much money you guys have, but I'm definitely not going to the Super Bowl this year. And even if I did have all the money in the world, I don't think I'd go to the Super Bowl this year with Kansas City and the Eagles playing. That's just my 2 cents. Well, as UConn grinds through the final month of the regular season, the monotony of the Big East will be broken up by 2 high-profile non-conference matchups at number 18 Tennessee and at number 2 South Carolina. So these games will not only provide the Huskies with crucial NCAA tournament resume boosters, but also serve as barometers for how ready they are for the gauntlet of March Madness and how ready they are for playing some tough competition. What the Big East kind of affords UConn on the women's side is an opportunity for them to get healthy, an opportunity for them to spread minutes around, an opportunity for Gino to tinker with the lineup, an opportunity for them to really showcase different play sets to kind of try things out. Because let's face it, whether you win by 25 or 15 or 7, UConn's not losing a Big East game this year. If they do, I will be shocked beyond all belief. And you can clip this and you can 100%, talk about all the different things that I've said wrong, but it's not going to happen. This team is way too talented for the Big East. And the Creighton is the best team, and we beat them at home by double digits. Probably should have been about a 20-point win. Struggled, won by 12. Could you imagine struggling and still winning by 12 points? Got to be a beautiful thing. So, but the negative of that is, and the reason why Gino does these little pauses, and the women's game is different. They do this all the time. In terms of matchup based, and when these games happen, the women are so much far ahead of the men when it comes to scheduling like this, because you never see. I think it happens once this year. I think Duke is playing Illinois at some point, like in February, but that's it. Like of all the men in men's and women's games, the women are the ones who kind of step out of their comfort zones and then go play. And think about it, UConn's playing both these games on the road. It's not like South Carolina and Tennessee are coming up to Hartford or to Storrs, or like splitting the two or somewhere neutral. I think that's the beauty of what the women's game has created lately. In particular, is they will do a neutral site game, but for the most part, every game is played on someone's campus or where they play the sport, whether it's a arena that can fit 10 or 12,000 people or 10,000, 5,000, whatever. But it feels intimate. It feels like college sports still. The exception this year, I think, was when Carolina used the Greensboro Coliseum, and that was strategic in itself because Greensboro has a lot of Carolina fans, a lot of women's basketball fans. It's if you're traveling, it's literally the airport's in Greensboro, so it's literally like 15 minutes away, so you could get off the plane and go to the game. So I think that was strategic from the UConn North Carolina game this year. But for the most part, most of these games are played on campus, and it's great for the game. UConn going to Kansas last year in the men, Baylor coming to UConn this year, and then UConn going to Texas this year. All of these games, I love the Madison Square Garden stuff, but these kind of middle of the season non-conference battles are fun. And Tennessee is rejuvenated. They're under first year head coach Kim Caldwell, who just had a baby and was like back out there 7 days later. As a husband to a wife of three kids, and has seen my wife bounce back multiple times from having babies. In fact, this resonated with me even more because 7 days or maybe 8 days after our daughter was born 4 months ago, we went out. Like, she was dressed and ready to roll, and we went out for a little bit. Now, was she 100% like the way she was 7 days after having a baby? No, but I think I put a picture up a long time ago, and people were like, wait, your wife just had a baby? So some women are superhuman in that respect, and Kim Caldwell is no different. And just to get into her play style, not just how incredible she is and how strong she is, they play an up-tempo, aggressive style, and they've made significant strides defensively lately. While they lack a dominant post presence, this is where UConn, I think, is going to have the biggest advantage they've had in past years. Their backcourt has been dynamic. So the pluses and minuses, I think Sarah Strong is going to eat, but I do think that this team really needs to focus on this backcourt that Tennessee has, because they have players capable of putting up 20+ points on any given night. If UConn plays to its potential, this should definitely be a winnable game. But remember, this isn't a neutral site game. This is at Rocky Top. This is in Knoxville, on Pat Summit Court. Paige's ability to control the tempo and exploit defensive gaps will be key in this game. I think Sarah is going to really dominate down low and assert her physical presence against a backcourt that's not that good. And I think Azzi is going to need to establish herself early to prevent any type of Tennessee momentum at home. So I think that game is the tricky one, but I think they should win. The behemoth comes against South Carolina, which remains the most dominant program in the country, present day. And even though they've lost key players from last year's squad, Dawn Staley just whooped up on Tennessee, and they just keep reloading. The beauty of women's college basketball, again, is there's still transfer portal, there's still NIL, there's some of the same challenges that the men face, but you can't go to the pros early. You just can't. So you go and play it. You can go play overseas. You can go play someplace else, but there's not a lot of options, right? You play college basketball, you make some money, and then you go play in the W, right? So Dawn just keeps reloading. She's got an impressive mix of veteran leadership and rising stars. They blew out number 5 Texas, blew out number 13 Oklahoma. They can dismantle top tier opponents. They've had some struggles. They lost to Lauren Betts and UCLA, right? And they got their doors blown off in that game. And that was with Ashlyn Watkins. Now they're not with her because she had an ACL injury. But UConn will have to play its best game to be competitive. And I don't even know if UConn plays their best game if they can beat South Carolina in South Carolina. I think if they play their best game and they it's kind of like when you think of fights that have trilogies or multiple fights, one guy wins, one guy loses, or one girl loses, whatever. With MMA, you have that kind of like third fight because they're not conference. This is the opening salvo, and you got to give the advantage to South Carolina because they'll be home in front of a raucous crowd, where the least expensive ticket is about $100 for nosebleeds. So this game is going to be like people going crazy. I think for the Huskies, it represents the real last chance to prove they belong among the nation's elite present day. Program is the best program of all time. I always have to qualify that because then people will be like, what do you mean they're not in the nation's elite? They've lost to number 3 Notre Dame. They've lost to number 4 USC, one on the road, one at home. And so that's cast some doubt in myself and other UConn fans and pundits alike that UConn is truly a championship contender. They are, but are they truly, right? Just like anything, things can fall your way. They could be in Notre Dame's bracket. Even if they lose to both Tennessee and South Carolina, could they still win a national championship? 1,000%. But they would also need help. Like you'd need a 3 seed or a 4 seed to upset Notre Dame, whoever that would be, and not play them. Or if you get to the Final Four, someone beats South Carolina, so you don't have to play them in the title. So some of those things that could happen could definitely favor UConn in the matchups. But a win in Columbia would be a massive statement, not only to the fan base, but to women's college basketball as a whole, and also could easily jump them into the 1 seed conversation, because even with the losses to Notre Dame and USC, if you go into, let's say they beat Tennessee and they go into Columbia and beat South Carolina, they're a 1 seed. It would silence any skepticism of this team. Obviously, I shouldn't say that because there's always going to be one that's, that was lucky, that was a fluke. Let's see them do it again. So, but as far as bracketology goes, that easily gets them a 1 seed. If they don't pull off the upset and they stay competitive, to use a boxing term, if they go the distance, they don't get knocked out, I think would be encouraging. You don't get any points for moral victories, but if they hang with the best team in the country, who I think is still South Carolina, even though UCLA is very good, I think that'd be big for their confidence. So after these 2 games, UConn likely won't face another true test until deep into March, like Sweet 16 to Elite 8 time. The remaining Big East schedule is crap. It's not like it's going to do any resume boosting. So these 2 games, as we've been talking about all year, for what feels like the last since the USC game, this is kind of where the postseason begins. So whether the Huskies are up to the challenge or kind of falter under that pressure will tell us a lot about what to expect when the NCAA tournament tips off. When we return, let's talk about finding some consistent secondary scoring. When Paige isn't it, or they lock her up, where does UConn go? You're locked on. And you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto. with Paige Bueckers and Sarah Strong accounting for nearly half of UConn scoring, the Huskies need more reliable offensive production from other players if they want to contend for a national title, especially if they want to beat a team like Tennessee and a team like South Carolina. Azzi, Fudd, and Kaitlyn Chen showed flashes of their potential in the win against DePaul, scoring 17 points each. But that's great. But both and the rest of the team have struggled to find consistency throughout the season. So, like, great example is Sarah had 11 points and Paige had 8 last night. So if they're both giving you close to 20 a game and half of that production is cut off, you need people like Azzi and Kaitlyn to step up for 17 each. But what happens if that happens in March? Can we count on that? Can we count on Azzi and Kaitlyn to give you 17? Is Ashlyn going to step up? So for UConn to thrive in March, at least 2 additional players, I would actually argue that potentially 3 need to step up as dependable scoring options. And I'm not talking about prolific, scoring like Azzi has been known for when she's locked in. But I'm talking about, the aggregate. If you get 8 or 10 points from Morgan Shelley, a game in March Madness, then you're ahead of the game. But you can't have the folks that are starting, the folks that are getting the majority of the minutes go quiet when there's a concerted effort to take Paige and Sarah away, right? Azzi's been streaky. Injuries have definitely hampered her development this year. I think UConn needs her to regain the form that once made her one of the most feared shooters in college basketball, like ones that it's Steph Curry, like where she shoots and you just kind of turn and walk away. That's the type of difference maker that she's been in the past, and if she can do that, then like the way she played against Louisville, then before the injury, I think we're in good shape. Kaitlyn, who averaged close to 16 points a game at Princeton last season, has been a steady presence, but sometimes has been a little passive. But I also feel like that's been kind of her deferential nature. She's trying to get other people involved. The one thing I will say is, I heard this from John Henson last night talking about when guys and gals move up from mid-major level to kind of high major. Sometimes it translates, sometimes it doesn't. I think you see flashes of Kaitlyn translating to the higher level that she's playing. Now, it's not a huge leap from Princeton to the Big East. It's in at least in the women's game, but at the same time, I needed her to be that 10, 12, 13 point scorer for this team to be, top 3 or 4 in the country, and she hasn't been that. I did an entire show on her being a huge X factor before the season even started. And this was not, we're talking about how we're not going to count on Azzi, or we're not going to count on others until they do need her to embrace a more aggressive role, especially when Paige is being, blanketed throughout the game. Like she was against Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame game, she still scored 25 points, but Kaitlyn was solid in the Notre Dame game, but I wouldn't exactly call her, reliable that game. And beyond Azzi and Kaitlyn, there are other players who could emerge as key scorers. We mentioned Ashlyn. Aubrey, we talked about her athleticism and how that allows her to score in transition off of putbacks, things like that. And maybe if Caroline Ducharme magically returns from injury, we'll have the ability to provide some instant offense. But her health remains a question mark, right? For me, the final month of the season will be crucial, whether the Huskies have enough firepower to make that deep run in March. And if UConn remains overly reliant, like in other words, if Paige and Sarah their usage rates are, even though I know Paige is incredibly efficient, but if their usage rates are where they're at now, it's going to make it that much harder to generate consistent scoring. And it's also why at the beginning of the pod, I talked about if Jana can make 1 or 2 threes a game and also be a defensive presence and just kind of pull bigs away from the basket. Do you know how easy the scoring lanes would be for Paige, even for Azzi, for Kaitlyn? You can't have everybody clogged in there. So if you have someone that can step back and shoot, then you force teams to change their defensive philosophy. Maybe they go zone. Whereas traditional man, you can't just park someone under the basket the way South Carolina has done for years. So the depth in this team has shown promise, but it just needs to translate into offensive production in big games, not against Georgetown, not against Villanova, in the bigger games, right? Gino has repeatedly emphasized the importance of this balanced scoring attack against top-tier players or top-tier teams. So, again, this shouldn't just be just the Paige and Sarah show. Aubrey's back. Azzi's back. Are they 100%? Probably not. But at what point do we start to expect more from them? So expect more from Kaitlyn. There's 17 days until the game against Tennessee. And I believe there's, where are we at? February. I think they play them the 4th. Let's check that real quick. When's the game against Tennessee? I know it's coming up. Yeah, it's not. The next game is the 6th. So, look, you got a week until you play Tennessee at Tennessee. And then you have 3 weeks until you play, or just under 3 weeks until you play South Carolina. We got to get it together and get a couple of other folks rocking and rolling before we play those Gamecocks. All right. That's been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in. And remember, it's not just how you get it done. It's doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. And as always, go Huskies.